If you're starting caravanning, there are a few mistakes that almost everyone makes in the beginning. And I'll be honest, I made quite a few of them myself. And the thing is, most of these mistakes aren't dangerous or serious, but they can make your experience harder, more stressful, and a lot less enjoyable than it needs to be. I remember when I first started, I thought I had everything figured out. I'd watched videos, read advice, looked at setups, and I felt reasonably confident. But once I actually got out there and started doing it, that's when the real learning began. Because caravanning isn't something you fully understand until you experience it. And what I want to do in this video is walk you through some of the most common beginner mistakes so you can avoid them early, save yourself time, reduce stress, and enjoy the experience much more from the start. Now, the first mistake, and probably one of the most common, is rushing. Rushing your setup, rushing your driving, rushing your decisions. I remember arriving at a site for the first time and feeling like I needed to get everything done quickly. Other people were around, I didn't want to hold anyone up, and I just wanted to get set up as fast as possible. But what I realized very quickly is that rushing actually makes everything harder. You miss steps, you forget things, you make small mistakes that you then have to fix. And that ends up taking more time than if you had just slowed down from the beginning. So here's the simple approach that changed everything for me. Slow down. Take your time. Because caravanning is not something that should feel rushed. Now, the second mistake is not understanding your vehicle and towing setup properly. And this is a big one because a lot of beginners focus on the caravan itself, what it looks like, the layout, the features, and they don't fully understand how it works with their vehicle. I remember early on, I didn't fully understand weights, towing limits, or how everything worked together. And while everything seemed fine, I realized later that understanding this properly gives you a lot more confidence and control. So if you're starting out, take the time to understand your setup, know your limits, know how your vehicle handles, and everything becomes easier. Now, the third mistake is trying to do everything perfectly. And this one is more about mindset. I remember thinking I needed to get everything right, the perfect setup, the perfect parking, the perfect process. But what I learned is that perfection is not the goal, progress is. Because every trip teaches you something, every setup improves your process, and the more you do it, the better you get. Now, the fourth mistake is overcomplicating things. And this is something I see all the time. People thinking they need complex systems, lots of gear, advanced setups. But the reality is, caravanning can be very simple. I remember simplifying my setup and realizing how much easier everything became. Less stress, less confusion, more enjoyment. So instead of trying to do everything, focus on the basics, because the basics are what make everything work. Now, the fifth mistake is not planning properly, and this doesn't mean over planning. It just means having a simple idea of where you're going, where you're staying, and what to expect. I remember doing a trip without much planning and realizing that having even a basic plan would have made things smoother. So now I always have a simple plan, not rigid, just enough to guide me. Now, here's something important. All of these mistakes are normal. Everyone goes through them. And the goal is not to avoid every mistake, it's to learn from them and improve, because that's what builds confidence. And once you start avoiding these common mistakes, everything becomes easier, smoother, and a lot more enjoyable. And that's what caravanning should be about. Now let's continue with some of the other mistakes that can catch beginners off guard, because once you understand these early, you save yourself a lot of frustration later on. The sixth mistake is not practicing before your first real trip. And this is one I definitely learned the hard way. It's very easy to think, I'll just figure it out when I get there. And while that sounds fine, it can make your first experience feel more stressful than it needs to be. I remember my early days doing things for the first time in a real situation, reversing, setting up, connecting everything, and feeling like I was learning everything at once. And while you do learn quickly that way, it's not the easiest way to build confidence. So here's what I recommend instead. Before your first trip, take your caravan somewhere quiet. An empty car park, a quiet street, somewhere with space. Practice reversing, practice setting up, practice going through the steps without pressure. Because when you remove the pressure, everything becomes easier to understand. And when you then go on your actual trip, you're not doing it for the first time, you're repeating something you've already practiced. And that makes a big difference. Now, the seventh mistake is poor sight positioning. And this links back to something we talked about earlier, but it deserves its own focus. Because how you position your caravan affects everything that comes after. I remember setting up in a spot that didn't seem like a big deal at first, but then realizing my awning didn't have enough space, my connections were awkward, and things just didn't flow well. And that's when I realized how important positioning actually is. So when you arrive, don't rush. Take a moment, look around, think about where everything will go. Where's your power? Where's your water? Where will your awning open? Where will you sit outside? Because once you position your caravan properly, everything else becomes easier. Now, the eighth mistake is not leveling properly. And this might sound like a small thing, but it makes a big difference. I remember the first time I didn't level properly, going inside and feeling like something was just slightly off. Walking felt different, sleeping felt different, even using things inside the caravan didn't feel quite right. And that's when I realized how important leveling actually is. So take your time with this step. Use your leveling ramps, make small adjustments, and get it right. Because once your caravan is level, everything feels more comfortable. Now, the ninth mistake is not doing a proper walk around check. And this is something that becomes a habit over time, but it's very important. I remember early on skipping this step, thinking everything was fine, but doing a quick walk around, checking your connections, checking your stabilizers, making sure everything is secure, gives you peace of mind, and it only takes a minute. Now, the 10th mistake is ignoring the weather, and this is something that can catch people off guard. Wind, rain, changing conditions. I remember setting up my awning without really thinking about the wind, and realizing later that I needed to secure it properly. So always be aware of the conditions. Adjust your setup if needed, because being aware of your environment makes a big difference. Now, here's the key idea from all of this. Most of these mistakes come from either rushing, not being prepared, or overthinking things. And once you slow down, keep things simple, and build good habits, you naturally avoid them. And that's how you start building real confidence in caravanning. Now, here's where things start to shift, because once you become aware of these common mistakes, you begin to approach caravanning differently. Instead of reacting to problems, you start preventing them. And that's a big turning point. I remember there was a moment after a few trips where things started to feel easier. Not because everything was perfect, but because I had made enough small mistakes to understand what actually mattered. And that's something I want to share with you, because it changes the way you think about caravanning. You don't need to know everything. You just need to know enough to get started and then improve as you go. Now let's talk about something that ties all of these mistakes together, and that's awareness. Because most beginner mistakes don't happen because people don't care. They happen because people aren't aware yet. I remember thinking I was doing things right until I realized there were better ways to do them. And that's normal, because awareness comes from experience. But the more awareness you have early on, the faster you improve. Now let's talk about confidence, because this is really what all of this builds towards. At the beginning, everything feels new. You're thinking about every step, every movement, every decision, and that's why it can feel overwhelming. But over time, those steps become automatic. Setting up becomes easier. Driving becomes more natural. Reversing becomes something you can do without overthinking. And that's when you realize this isn't as hard as it first seemed. Now, here's something important. Confidence doesn't come from avoiding mistakes. It comes from learning how to handle them. I remember having moments where things didn't go perfectly. Maybe I misjudged a position. Maybe I had to reset and try again. But every time that happened, I learned something. And that's what builds real confidence, because you start to trust yourself. Now, let's talk about something that helps speed up this process, and that's having a simple routine. Because once you have a routine, you remove a lot of the thinking. You know what step comes next. You know what to check, and that makes everything smoother. I remember developing my own routine over time. At first, it was slow, but eventually it became something I could do without even thinking about it. And that's when everything starts to feel easy. Now, let's talk about another important point, expectations, because a lot of beginners expect things to go perfectly, and when they don't, it can feel frustrating. But caravanning is not about perfection, it's about experience. Some setups will be smooth, some will take a bit longer, some trips will go exactly as planned, others will require you to adjust, and that's all part of it. Now, here's something I've learned. The more flexible you are, the more you enjoy the experience, because you're not trying to control everything. You're just working with what you have. Now, let's talk about something practical again, problem solving, because things will come up, small issues, small challenges, and that's where your mindset matters. Instead of seeing them as problems, see them as part of the process. I remember having a few small issues early on, and instead of getting frustrated, I started to look at them as learning moments. And that shift made a big difference because it removed the pressure. Now, here's something that ties everything together. Caravanning is a skill, and like any skill, it improves with practice. The more you do it, the easier it becomes. The more you experience, the more confident you feel. And the more confident you feel, the more you enjoy it. And that's really what this is all about. Not getting everything perfect, but enjoying the journey. Now, as we bring everything together, I want to leave you with something that will make this whole journey feel a lot easier. Because at the end of the day, caravanning is not about avoiding every mistake. It's about learning how to handle them. I remember when I first started, I thought the goal was to get everything right from the beginning, the perfect setup, the perfect positioning, the perfect process. But what I realized over time is that no one starts perfect. Every experienced caravanner you see out there has made these same mistakes. They've rushed their setup, they've positioned poorly, they've forgotten things, they've had to reset and try again, and that's exactly how they got better. So instead of trying to avoid mistakes completely, focus on understanding them. Because once you understand them, they stop being problems and they become lessons. Now let's quickly bring everything back together. Slow down and don't rush. Understand your towing setup. Let go of trying to be perfect. Keep things simple. Have a basic plan. Practice before your first trip. Take your time with positioning. Level your caravan properly. Do a quick walk around check. Be aware of the weather. These are not complicated steps, but they make a huge difference. Now, here's the important part. You don't need to remember everything perfectly. You just need to be aware of these things, because awareness is what changes your experience. Now, let's talk about confidence one more time, because this is what everything leads to. Confidence in driving, confidence in setting up, confidence in making decisions, and that confidence comes from doing. Every trip builds it. Every setup builds it. Every small mistake you learn from builds it. And before you know it, you're the one who looks like you've been doing this for years. Now, here's something I want you to really take in. There's no rush. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to have everything figured out. You just need to start, because once you start, everything begins to make sense. Now, I still remember sitting outside after one of my early setups, everything finally done, just looking around and thinking, this is what it's about. Not the mistakes, not the setup, not the process, but the experience, the freedom, the simplicity. And that's what you don't want to lose sight of. Now, if you're just starting your caravanning journey, here's the best thing you can do. Keep things simple, take your time, learn as you go, and enjoy it, because once you do that, everything becomes easier. And if you want more simple, practical caravanning advice like this, with real experiences and lessons learned along the way, make sure you hit subscribe, because I'll be helping you every step of the way.